So good afternoon. So nice to have a chance to be together again as our stalwart band of meditators, forging forward with this the discipline of coming to classes. As I'd mentioned sometime months back, it's the foundation. Traditionally, the spiritual life in the Buddhist context, at least, is defined through three activities: moral discipline, or like moral discipline, concentration, and wisdom. So, moral discipline means that kind of strength of mind, right? The discipline, a little bit similar to the discipline of, diet, or the discipline of exercise, or the discipline of doing what you're supposed to do, etc. Which kind of like a muscle that we exercise or don't exercise, in different parts of our life. We're probably very, very disciplined in some aspects of our life. There's probably some other aspects where we're not quite as disciplined. But moral discipline is the discipline of following ethical conduct. It means being very careful with our actions of body, speech, and mind, what we say, what we do, what we think. And honestly, it's that living a life, being a good person, right? It's like exercising that choice of like, given the opportunity to lie, do I lie? Given the opportunity to steal, do I steal? Given the opportunity to hurt someone with my words, do I hurt them or do I refrain, right? So how much are we working that muscle? That's the practice of moral discipline. And that's what really builds a strength of mind. It is the strength to choose what to do as opposed to just following our instincts. And where that strength of mind really comes out is in meditation, right? Because once the eyes close and you're starting to track things on a very fine, think about it. Like people wonder, well, oh, meditation's so hard. Why is it so hard? Well, think about what you're doing. It's such fine-grained control, right? Normally, the idea of being a good person, right, is just that we're reasonably nice and reasonably helpful, and it's kind of big scale activities. But meditation, you get down to this very fine-grained, like every breath, every moment. What's your mind doing? There's usually few, if any, other areas of our life where we have to have that much control. It's a little bit similar to physical activities like rock climbing or riding a bike, where you have to be very, very careful of your physical behavior. But here in meditation, you have to be very careful of your mental behavior. What am I doing? What am I not doing? Where's my mind? Where is it not? So clearly it requires quite a lot of strength of mind and finesse. So totally normal for us to not be fantastic at it. So that's not anything that any of us need to worry about at all. But just the fact that we're trying, that's the amazing thing. And similarly with and just like exercise, right? Like it's, I'm trying to exercise more actively using the gym in my apartment complex now that the world has started to open up a little bit more. But I'm a stranger to the gym. I see these obscure pieces of exercise equipment, and I don't particularly know how to use them or how to, make use of them without hurting myself and so forth. So I'm learning, but there's this sort of awkward phase of like overcoming self-consciousness and just trying, right? But that's the way exercise unfolds. The discipline of going there, and then the humility of getting on a piece of equipment where, you can't do a whole lot of weight and you're not even sure if you're doing it right and you're not sure how many reps you're supposed to do. But then like just picking yourself up, these small steps, right? So that's the lovely thing about a gym is that ideally you have people, well, I mean, in many gyms, you have people of varying levels of strength, varying levels of, what is it, body mass index, varying levels of body fat and strength, and everybody just kind of showing up and like, okay, let's try, right? And that's a great analogy for our life of meditation, because the point is we show up and we try, and we may be better some days, worse other days, may do better with some meditations than others. But the point is there's a humility there, but there's a persistence, right? And there's a nice expression like we need to approach meditation like water wearing away rock, like water wearing away rock. So in the analogy, water, is there anything softer than water? I mean, it's pretty soft. Maybe only air, right? Water is about as soft as it gets. Rock, about as hard as it gets, right? But the persistence of water, drip, drip, drip on rock, you know how it smooths things away progressively. Eventually, you get like the Grand Canyon, right? So in the analogy, the rock is our own mind, including our deeply embedded mental habits. And these habits have a strength to them. Like rock, they're often so strong, hard, seemingly solid, that it feels like almost impossible. How on earth could we challenge or confront such a deep habit? The habit of distraction, of course, is the first one, but then there are habits of self-centeredness, right? Habits of miserliness, habits of impatience, habits of jealousy, right? Habits of uncontrolled desire for food, desire for sex, desire for money, desire for stuff, laziness. Just a list just goes on and on of all these strong, tendencies that we might have aspirations to challenge, but they feel so solid like rock. But meditation is so soft, right? It's just the single activity of bringing your attention back to your chosen object of focus. You can think about that almost like one drop of water, or just one little pass of water over the surface of a rock. And every single time you're doing that, it's reinforcing this habit, like water wearing away rock. And I mentioned at the outset that there are these three practices: moral discipline, concentration, and concentration depending on the strength we build through moral discipline. But wisdom, the practice of wisdom, depending on the strength that we build through concentration. And the way that works is that, and I suspect you've had this experience, right? As our mind becomes more quiet and more still, we can gain more clarity about aspects of our life. And sometimes we gain insights and we make connections that we hadn't made before. The traditional analogy is like a candle flame. If it's blown by the wind, it flickers, and the light that it produces is very inconsistent. It's very hard to read by a flickering candle flame. But if the candle flame is still, then even if it's not very bright, it's still a lot easier to read, right? Because there's a consistency there. So the stillness of the mind achieved through meditation functions like a still candle flame that allows us to illuminate topics that were otherwise a bit subtle, a bit hard to discern. It enables us to gain clarity about many things, one of which is just how our mind works. Also things, but all of the things we've sort of gone over in these classes, including like the relationship between our mind and external objects, like what's the relationship between, why is it that if we wake up and our mind is a bit sad or grieving or overwhelmed or whatever, the whole world appears dark, right? Or the whole world appears heavy and difficult to deal with. If we wake up and our mind is joyful, light, relaxed, the whole world just seems very peaceful, right? So the whole world changes depending on our state of mind. That's an amazing relationship between the mind and the world we experience. So the mind can notice these subtleties, and as a result develop new insights and allow us to take insights that we'd found more and more deeply into our heart. On just one final point on the topic of insight, two somewhat contradictory messages, and I'll leave it to you to figure out what's the balance between these two contradictory messages. One was the advice which I'd received from one of my main teachers, and which I still mostly try to practice, which is to never, and again, this contradicts, the advice you might see elsewhere, but never keep a journal right next to your meditation seat. Or a computer or your smartphone, right? If you simply put them well out of arm's reach, it reduces the temptation to leave meditation and immediately write down all those little insights. So that's on one side of the spectrum, that piece of advice. The other piece of advice, I'd recently looked at a number of videos from Yuval Noah Harari. This is the guy who wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus. He's an Israeli historian and scholar. He's a very smart dude, right? Very, very smart guy. And he talks about meditating 2 hours a day, 2 or 3 hours a day. And I'm definitely coasting on this reputation of having been a monk in the past, but I'll tell you up front, I do not meditate 2 or 3 hours a day. So he meditates a lot more, but his mind is so clear, right? Very clear, very good memory, very clear. And the two, obviously the meditation helps us clear mind. The clear mind probably helps meditation. Everybody, we each have our own dispositions and life circumstances, but it's a great example of these practices helping to build a clear mind, right? If you have a calm mind, a peaceful mind, if you choose to turn your mind to any particular subject, it's a lot easier to hold that clarity. It's a whole lot easier to gain these insights, and that's the power of wisdom. Okay. So it's a very long preamble. Now for what may or may not be your favorite bit, the actual meditation. So one of the things that is one of the deepest tendencies in our mind is what is known as self-cherishing. So it's a deeply embedded habit, self-cherishing. So self-cherishing is the habit of mind that sees our normal self as the most precious person of all, and sees our happiness and our freedom as the most important of everyone else's happiness and freedom, sees our own as most important. This is, sometimes we casually refer to this as self-centeredness or selfishness or self-obsession, obsessive self-concern, these kinds of things. Think about that. The mind that views our own happiness as supremely important, our own freedom as supremely important. This mind is as instinctive and natural as our breathing. It is automatic and it is instinctive. Whenever we begin to, so if this mind is like rock, in that it is very hard to challenge and to reduce and to overcome this mind. And so it's very important to know. This is called. There's an old saying: "Train in the three difficulties." Train in the three difficulties. Train in the three difficulties means train in three things that are very difficult for us to do. And those are recognizing our delusions, recognizing these disturbed mental states, reducing them, and overcoming them once and for all. Now, the most important of these is just recognizing these tendencies. And one reason why it's so difficult for us to recognize our self-cherishing, this tendency to see ourselves as most important, one reason it's so difficult for us to recognize our self-cherishing is because of how strong our self-cherishing is. Because our self-cherishing is so strong, we don't want to admit to any faults. We don't want to see anything in a light that is unflattering. And I'm not saying this is how we are, but it is not uncommon to find people who, are very, very concerned about how they look in a photograph, right? So there's a photograph of a group of people. Which person do we look at first? Us. If we're in that photograph, we're like, oh, that's a terrible picture of me. Or maybe that's an acceptable picture of me. My mother, for example, and it's very unfair, and she may listen to this and so forth, and I may get in great trouble, but it's extraordinarily hard to find a photograph of her that she finds acceptable. She's exceedingly picky, exceedingly picky about which photographs are permissible. Now she's a very good-looking person. All of the photographs are perfectly good from my point of view, but she's got a very high standard, and it's very, very uncomfortable for us, right? But where is that discomfort coming from? It's coming from this mind that finds it unbearable, just finds it painful that we might be reflected in a negative light in a photograph, for example. But it's the same mind that gets very uncomfortable about public speaking, right? Now, I've practiced public speaking, so just because I'm good at public speaking doesn't mean that I'm free from self-cherishing. You can get good at these things, but normally we get this incredible self-concern if we're up in front of a group, right? And everybody gets nervous in front of them. But it manifests in a gazillion different ways. But one of the ways it manifests is not wanting to notice if there's any faults in our mind. So sometimes I get the little glimmer, maybe I'm a little bit jealous, and my mind immediately says, no, it's not possible, right? You're a highly evolved human being, highly refined, trained meditator. Impossible that you might be subject to jealousy. There must be some more sophisticated explanation for why you really don't like that person who has a job that you would really like to have. There must be some very sophisticated reason. It probably involves them not being very competent or qualified, right? So let's go find that long, sophisticated explanation for why they're not really competent and qualified for that job, why you should have that job instead. And then let's tell everybody that we can about that to try to reinforce and give that story some reality, right? Because fundamentally it's not possible that we would be jealous, not possible that we would be angry, not possible that we would be self-important, proud, and so forth. This is the first difficulty, train in the first difficulty, recognizing our own delusions. And one of the hardest, again, for us to recognize is our own self-cherishing, just the sense that we are, the feeling that we are special, right? In the past, in these classes, I've used the analogy of penguins, right? Just looking at a group of penguins. Which of the penguins is most special? I don't know why I pick on penguins, but you see these huge flocks, like 100,000. They all look basically identical. Which of them is most special? We find it impossible to distinguish. Well, we are just Homo sapiens. Another shout out to the book, right? It was just another primate, right? Like squirrels, mammals and so forth. We're just another mammal, right? Basically function exactly the same as all the other mammals. Nothing special about us whatsoever. Is the exact opposite of a lot of the self-help books that you'll find that are like talking about how special you are. And sometimes we do need cheering up, right? So sometimes it's good for us to think, well, how fortunate we are. But if you're not depressed, then it's good to also become aware of our self-cherishing, because in fact, it's our self-cherishing that makes us depressed, right? It's because we feel like we're so special and no one appreciates us. We're so special, right? But we don't have all the special opportunities that we deserve. This mind that thinks that we are so special is at the root of all of our other delusions. We're so special that we shouldn't have to put up with long waiting times. I tried to book a doctor's appointment this morning, and I was told that I had to first go get a referral, and they had to fax it over to this other doctor, and then you had to wait for like months and months. Now, I know that our US health system is highly inefficient, but it doesn't bother me very much until I'm the one that has to wait. As soon as I'm the one that has to wait, I'm like, this is unbearable. I am willing to give the receptionist a very hard time about the broken nature of our country's medical record system. Why, right? Why? Because I find it unbearable that I, since I'm special, should have to wait, right? Or that I should not, get what I want, and this incredible obsessive self-concern, and the sense that we're so different from everybody else that no one could possibly understand. And maybe taking again, I seem to be continually delaying our actual meditation practice, but despite having promised you that we would start our meditation maybe 20 minutes ago. But think back to this common scenario that happens when you're a kid, right? You've hit puberty, you have your first first few waves of like hormonal rushes. You fall in love with someone. Common scenario, right? You think of your parents. They're the last people you would ever seek advice from. Like, how could they ever possibly understand what it's like to fall in love, right? No one has ever experienced the angst and pain that we have felt of like unrequited love, or how deeply we long to get the attention of someone that we've fallen in love with. But there's a strong sense like, how could our parents, they simply could never understand, right? Because we're so unique and special, and our angst is greater than everyone else's angst. And normally it sort of gets a little bit more bearable over the years after that. We read self-help books, we look at talk shows, we sort of see that a lot of other people go through similar things. We realize we're not really as isolated as we thought, but there's still this deep instinctive tendency to regard ourselves as like supremely important and special. And so in meditation, what we can do is just to try to very gently see how that mind manifests, because that one mind of self-cherishing, just trying to recognize that is so powerful. Not giving ourselves a hard time, right? Part of not being special is recognizing that we have the same delusions as everybody else, right? That's the thing. Like, we think we're uniquely distracted, we're uniquely either we're uniquely able to meditate or we're uniquely unable to meditate. But either way, it's our self-cherishing, just telling us this story that makes us either feel incredible pride in our ability to meditate or incredibly despondent. But the point is, we're basically like sampling a cup of humanity. If you imagine humanity as a great ocean, you just take a ladle of that ocean, and that is your experience, right? And that's actually, from one point of view, it's not. It's from one point of view, you're simply not special, and you're old enough now that you can know the truth. You're not special. It's time someone finally told us the truth, right? We're not special. But from another point of view, we've got this wonderful opportunity. We've got a ladleful of humanity, right? A ladleful of the experience of living beings, and we're not even humans. Humans are not special, right? They're just. This is a point from Yuval Noah Harari. I'm practicing saying his name because it's a mouthful. 70,000 years ago, humans were an insignificant primate, not having any particularly greater impact on the ecosystem than any other primate, or species of mammal, right? So our species is not special. We are not special members of the species. We just have a sample right now, a small cup of life, right? Of the experience of being a living being. But that's miraculous, right? That's amazing, because we have an opportunity to know, in a sense, to know the experience of every other living being. A Buddha, in Buddhist terminology, a Buddha is defined as an omniscient, all-knowing, enlightened being, extraordinarily lofty, right? But his behavior and conduct, he just wore robes. He was indistinguishable from any other member of his community, never acted special. So this amazing contrast between this person who basically acts totally humble, but from one point of view is said to have omniscient wisdom. How can you have omniscient wisdom? The actual gateway to omniscient wisdom is knowing that our experience is like a sampling, a taste of the experience of all living beings. Everything that is known through the mind of a living being, and the mind that we have is not truly different from the mind of any other living being. It's just a cup full of consciousness, right? Just a ladle full of consciousness, and it is no more or less salty than any other part of that ocean of consciousness of all living beings. We've got this sampling of this experience. So in our meditation now, we can just relax a bit with some breathing meditation, and then just try to turn our attention to recognizing this self-cherishing, this mind that regards ourselves as so special, and try not to turn away. It's not a heavy thing. It's something we can be very just relaxed. It's just a natural part of our human experience. We just try to notice. Okay, so we find a comfortable position, hold our back relatively straight. Take a deep breath in and out, just allowing ourselves to relax. And another deep breath, just asking ourselves, what is important right now? And we continue becoming aware of our breathing, or holding this awareness of our breathing, giving ourselves some practice of reining in our attention. And as we allow ourselves to relax, we're also allowing our mind to be less reactive, less afraid or impulsive, more relaxed, even in the face of unflattering experience, unflattering truths about ourselves or difficult experiences. We don't need to turn away or shy away from difficult experiences. And one of the most difficult is simply recognizing our own self-cherishing, this instinctive tendency to think of ourselves as special, to think of our own happiness as most important, to think of our own freedom as most important. We would all like to claim that we are infinitely humble, generous, loving, big-hearted. And certainly we do have humility, love, generosity, and a good heart. But what is more powerful is to recognize how those are the exceptions in our experience, and the default, our deep instinctive tendency, is this mind of self-cherishing. Minds of love and humility are also quite natural. They can arise very spontaneously. But what is more important right now is just to become aware of the bedrock, the strong, solid tendency towards self-cherishing. And to make this recognition easier for us to bear, we just think everyone has this mind. Everyone thinks they're special. And that's why none of us are special. None of us are special because every single one of us thinks that we're special. We try to find some specific examples from our own experience. We try to recognize how our own personal self-cherishing manifests. We don't need to feel tense. We don't need to give ourselves a hard time. In fact, we should be delighted, so happy if we notice our self-cherishing, because it's difficult. We never want to see anything unflattering. We can remain relaxed and peaceful, and at the same time, we can honestly and with humility notice how our own self-cherishing manifests. What does it look like in our experience? Totally normal, totally natural mind. Everyone has it. How does ours manifest? And then we can contemplate that when we can make a decision that when we arise from our meditation, we just try to be watchful of our mind in our daily activities. We try to notice when this mind of self-cherishing rears up, how it looks, how it manifests. Instead of rationalizing our behaviors or reactions, we just try to notice how these instinctive minds arise, just becoming aware. And then we can make a dedication thinking through the power of the positive action of engaging and listening, contemplating, and meditating. How wonderful if we could be perfectly aware, honestly aware of what's happening in our own mind. How wonderful if everyone could be aware of this, living in a world free from self-deception. Very small step from that world to a world where everyone's minds are controlled and peaceful. And then with this vision, we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation.